Laurie Barkman guides business owners how to dramatically increase enterprise value and build with their exit in mind. Laurie is the former CEO of a $100 million revenue company that was acquired by a Fortune 50. So just a little credibility there. Capitalizing on her succession experience, Laurie founded the Business Transition Sherpa, providing transition advisory and coaching to entrepreneurs. She's also a certified mergers and acquisitions advisor with Stony Hill, specializing in valuations, sell-side, and acquisition services for companies in the low and middle market. Laurie is an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Carnegie Mellon University, teaching a master's capstone on corporate innovation, and is a speaker on the topics of business transition, succession, entrepreneurship, and M&A. In addition, she is the Amazon best-selling author of the Business Transition Handbook and offers an online masterclass called The Endgame Entrepreneurship to create a sellable asset. She's been featured in all kinds of press, and she does great work for various companies and families. I won't read the whole bio. And Laurie's a rare returning guest to the DealQuest Podcast. Laurie, welcome back.
Oh, Corey, it's so fun to be back with you. We were reminiscing before we got on air how long we've known each other now, and the evolution of your show, the growth of your show is amazing, so exciting. I'm so appreciative that you're having me back.
Well, it's great. Listen, as regular listeners know, we've rarely had a return guest, and in part it's because we've been fortunate enough to have the podcast be popular enough that we get a lot of incoming, guests. But Laurie was such a great guest all the way back on episode 93, which was like 4 years ago that we aired that. It'll be close to 4 years by the time this airs. And so many of you didn't hear her back then, but also there's some new stuff going on, right? The book is new, the course is new. And of course, the M&A market is very different than what it was, 4 years ago. So I'm excited. So Laurie, as opposed to my normal opening questions, which you answered the last time around, about what did you want to be when you wanted to grow up, and what was your first deal? And folks, you can always go back to episode 93 and listen to that one too, if you want to hear those answers. I'm going to ask you a different question starting out. Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Like, was there background in your family? Like, I know for me, I had no entrepreneurial background at all, but for some reason I was called to it. Did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
Absolutely not. No,
okay.
I didn't.
Right.
And there's some entrepreneurial genes in my family, but not in my immediate family. Okay. My family, my parents were employed by the state of New York and the county of Albany, right? You can't get more conservative than those government jobs. And it's funny, in retrospect, I see Bill Gates, right? Think back to Bill Gates and how he was so savvy to figure out that this computer software thing was a thing. And he jumped on it. What did I do? My dad was a computer programmer from the 70s, and I completely ignored it. So it was staring at me in the face. I ignored it. I didn't have the risk profile or the big idea to start my own business. So I didn't go that path. And it was when I was getting my MBA that I was really exposed to entrepreneurship and thought, oh yeah, this sounds really cool, really amazing. But again, I didn't have the big idea. I didn't have the risk profile. And ultimately, I had some debt I had to repay from this MBA degree. And I was pretty nervous about that. I figured for me, when people go to Vegas and they gamble, they leave feeling like they spent their money on good time. For me, I would always say, no, I'd rather go shopping because I know I'll leave with a sweater and I'll be happy with that. And I think entrepreneurship is a little bit, you got to have the risk profile. What I realized years later is that there's many different flavors of entrepreneurship. The one that I was getting most familiar with in business school was the venture side. And there's obviously high stakes there when you're bringing in venture capitalists. And yeah, it wasn't a fit for me. But to your question, how did I figure it out? I mean, that's for me in my story, as you shared in my bio, going through an exit, going through that experience, and on the other side of it, realizing I really like deals. And that's what you and I talked about on that episode all those years ago. We talked about how I discovered I'm a deal junkie. And the manifestation of my entrepreneurship has come together in the support of entrepreneurs in their next journey as an entrepreneur. And building with the exit in mind was something you mentioned in the introduction. And absolutely. And I'm building some infrastructure, building a platform for that to support entrepreneurs. And it's really fun. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm in that phase of my career too, where this is all gravy, and it doesn't feel like work. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have told me that when they're really in their flow and their groove, it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like, whether it's an investment or a job is up to the beholder. But for me, it feels like an investment, and I'm investing in something and investing in myself. And I've just been having a ball with it.
I love it. So am I correct in assuming then, or let me not even ask you, I can just ask straight out. So when you were younger, or did you ever think you would be an author and a course, online course provider, or was that also a even more recent development?
Yeah, no vision for that whatsoever. I think I've always been a pretty decent writer, and thought at one point I might go into journalism or might write a book. And then for some reason I got this fear of getting writer's block. I never had writer's block, but the fear of writer's block prevented me from going down that path. And it was only after I've had my podcast called Succession Stories. I had it for a couple of years. And someone said to me, hey, I think you've got something here. You've got a lot of content. You've got some experience pulling some things together. I think you should write a book. And I said, you're crazy. Just like they said when they said to me, oh, you should have a podcast. I said, no. Now here we are, over episode 170 on my side. And it's funny, life takes these turns, but I can't really say, Corey, that I had this, this grand plan and this manifestation of marketing coming out this way. I've been a marketer a long time, but I never really thought of myself as a content creator. And I think the other thing that's really interesting that's coming out of my experience, even, as I'm reflecting back on what you shared in my bio, educator sort of stands out, right? Adjunct professor, writing a book, creating a course. There's something innate in marketing. If we do a good job at marketing, we're educating to the sense that we want to find a match of a product or service with the buyer. And ultimately, that's what I'm trying to do with what I'm offering. And so that's an interesting, part of this challenge.
Love it. I love it. It's interesting. We won't get it too deep into the mechanics of it. I want to get into the deal side of things. But, I wrote my authentic negotiating book. And I will tell you that, I was always a reader. I always appreciated authors. I was always like, but, it's like anything else. Once you do it, I was like, I got an even deeper appreciation for like really good authors because what it takes. Listen, I had some help. I went with a business hybrid publisher, which is, by the way, we're not going to spend a lot of time on book deals. That's not the topic of this, but it is a deal subject we've covered a little bit in the past. Major publisher deal, hybrid publisher, self-publishing. They're all different deals on that. And for me, frankly, there are a lot of people out there who go the hybrid route where you get somebody who helps you write it, and they do a quick review on it and put it out. I had somebody who helped take content that I was already delivering in workshops or whatever and, give me a first draft of a book. But then I spent a year like doing 2 major rewrites of it because to me, it had to be great. It had to be much more than a calling card. We had a thing it goes around Entrepreneurs Organization, a joke that most business books should be an article. They have about an article's worth of content and then 150 pages on top of that. And I never wanted people to say that to me. So I guess before we get into the M&A side, I don't know about you, but like I got an even deeper respect for people who write really good books because it takes something.
Yeah, it sure does. And I'll be honest, I hated my first draft. And people say, well, how long did it take you to write it? And I'm pretty honest about it. And I say that, end to end, it took 1.5 years. Yeah. But that's because I lost 6 months and I did a rewrite. And it was really important to do the rewrite, I think. And what I ended up doing was saying, okay, who is my reader? What do I think they care about? And after that, everything just flowed. The chapters pretty much fell into place because I realized that when people are interested in the topic I'm talking about, there's 2 aspects. One is pain and one is gain. And I can't just take one, I got to do both. And so that's the subtitle, right? How to avoid, succession pitfalls, how to create valuable exit options. And the chapters of the book became pitfalls to avoid. You want to do these things because you don't want to step into this, this or that. So let's dive in. And each chapter just manifested and it flowed. And I became really proud of it. And I think that's the main thing is that whatever I put out there, it doesn't have to be the biggest bestseller. It did do well in its initial pop on Amazon. And that's really exciting. And the people who've read it have shared wonderful reviews. And that's amazing. But at the end of the day, it's what people do with it. I'm encouraging people to make action. That's why I'm called it a handbook. And I even tell you in the very first chapter, here's how to hack the book. Dog ear it, write in it, make it your own. And every chapter ends with an action table. What are you going to do? And key takeaways. And it was very purposeful in that mindset of don't just read this and say, oh, that sounds great. Actually make an intention and do something.
Love it. So let's just keep going down that route. So obviously, we're not going to give everything. People should go buy and read the book. But, give us a couple of the bigger points in the book. What are some of these pitfalls that you address, one or two of the big ones, and then how do they impact enterprise value or even getting a deal done?
Yeah, absolutely. I kick off with the softer side. You might be surprised at that, but I kick off with the softer side, and I talk about the importance of having a transition mindset.
Yes.
And being able to focus on what's important to you for your personal transition. It's avoiding kicking the can too much on some of these things. The personal readiness, the personal transition is kick cannibal, if that's a word. It's just too easy to say, oh, I'll figure that out later. Well, guess what? People never do. And then it is some of the major causes, I think. There's lots of issues why the data shows that a high percentage, like 75% of business owners are unhappy. They express unhappiness 1 year after the sale. And there's not just one reason, as you can imagine, but how we personally identify with the business, especially if our name is on the door or if it's a family business where you have a lot of friends and social relationships. And imagine it just feels like a cold water bath when you got to step away from that. It can feel very lonely. It can feel that you've had a total change of identity and you're wandering a little bit aimlessly. And so there's a proactivity and thinking around personal readiness that I'm advising on in the very, very first section of the book.
I love that. And I want to take it even one step further, because I love that stat that I don't love the stat, but I love making people aware of the stat that up to 75% of the folks, are unhappy or have issues, after they transition. And I will tell you, because I want to give light on this, and I mentioned it before a little bit, but I really do. There's some percentage of the 75% actually even go into very deep depression, right? Like unhappy is one thing, but like clinically depressed, right, is another thing. And it's something that's not talked about. And I'm personally aware of some folks in the situation. And by the way, some of these folks are folks who exited with more money than they and their kids and their grandkids probably ever need, right? So it's not like, oh, they exited and they got, $500,000 or $1 million, and it's not, they still got to figure out what to do. I'm talking about people who got tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And they literally, were depressed. And it's a topic that I really care about because I'm very interested in, like, one of the things I talk about generally is, and I'm actually about to record a solo cast on it, more specifically is about, this growth for growth's sake mentality, and like anything where people think this is the end of it and then they get there and they're disillusioned, right? Like, why are we doing this if that's going to happen? And the last thing I'll mention, and I want you to delve a little more into this, on how you avoid this, how you prepare, right? How you work with people to do that. But there's a reason why the kickoff, I'm running a conference in Austin, September 11th to the 14th for entrepreneurs organization members and their guests on it. It's a deals conference, not just M&A, raising capital, M&A, joint ventures, strategic alliance, that kind of stuff. And our kickoff speaker, we're kicking off 9/11. He has 9/11 business story that connects. But the other thing about him is that he was a friendly client of mine, and he was hesitant to exit because he knew somebody very, very well who went through exactly this huge exit, literal, clinically depressed after that. And there's a guy, Damon Gersh is a guy who actually, did well, you train people on, because he took an extra year and a half to figure out how he does this in a way where he's going to be happy and motivated and excited. And it's over 3 years later, and he did that successfully. So we're actually having him address this specific point from stage in Austin at the Deal Exchange conference for you. Yeah. So give us some tips. How do folks, like, first of all, there's the recognition, right, that this is a risk and you should know about it. And then, what do folks need to do to try to avoid this big issue?
Well, I think of it as a spectrum. You have on one side, things that I call pull factors. And then on the other side, you have things that are called push factors.
Yes.
And then there's middle space. So I'll cover all three. Pull factors are positive things. If you want to kind of think about it at a high level, things that are pulling you in a positive way to your next thing, whatever that next thing is. So for example, I mean, I have a long list of things in my masterclass that I give as examples and in the book, but it can include things like being a grandparent, right? You want to be a grandparent full time, or it could be starting another company. It could be traveling around the world on a sailboat. All of these are real examples. And you're shaking your head. So you may know some people who fall into those buckets. There's an infinite list of things that can make us excited for our next thing, right? You just have to contemplate what those could be. It might be becoming a craftsperson and learning a craft. Maybe you've always wanted to be a woodworker and so on, or fishing. So all of those things, and relationships, it's what you do, it's who you do it with, it's where you do it. All of those things can become positive pull factors. On the other side of the spectrum, we have things that are push factors. So what that means is it feels like you're being pushed out.
Yeah.
Very commonly, Corey, these are negative, very negative things that we don't like to talk about. Death, divorce, dissolution of a business, departure of a partner, disaster. If you think about natural disasters, but also COVID was a pretty big disaster. And you could also throw disruption as another D in there. So the Ds, we don't like to talk about the Ds. They sometimes feel like taboo, but these are the negative things that if we're not prepared can really sink a business and really feel like you're ready to get pushed out, or you want to leave because it's so stressful. And so there's the middle space. And the middle space is an okay place to be, right? Because by the way, there's a correlation with business value. Let's say it's under 10%, but it's there. It might be stronger on the negative, but certainly on the positive. There's been some studies done this, but if you are positive and working towards your next thing and positive thinking about it, right? Head, heart, wallet is a framework I like to talk about. So if we're in alignment on those things, what's going to happen? Your body will follow. You will put work into it. You will roll up your sleeves and you'll go in that direction. If there's the negative things, what are you going to try to do? You're going to kick the can. You're going to avoid it. You're going to have to, go down that path. And this middle place is a watch out zone, because what can happen in the middle is complacency.
Yeah.
So you might say, well, what about retirement? Well, retirement isn't complacency. Retirement is just retirement. And it doesn't necessarily make it from a correlation standpoint on value, positive or negative. It can be in the middle. The watch out is if you are taking your foot off the gas towards the end of your run, which again might be again based on your age or life stage. It could be a retirement and you're taking your foot off the gas. You're not reinvesting in the business. I was leading a webinar a couple months ago, and after the webinar, kind of did a hot seat roundtable of folks in the audience. The group was about 10 people. And the first guy, said, okay, tell me about your business. What are you thinking in terms of an exit timeline? He said about 10 years. I said, oh, okay. And then as the questions unfolded, I found out he's not reinvesting in the business. He's not doing business development. He's the one responsible for his business development.
Wow.
I said, hey, red flag.
Yeah.
Red flag. You got to see what I'm seeing here. And I think I scared him a little bit, but hopefully, it's almost like what the doctor ordered is you got to get a dose of the bad news. So, good news for him, 10 years, he can change course here, but you don't want to be waking up 10 years from now going, okay, I'm ready to sell now. And then all your competitors are totally outgunned you. And your business isn't going to be worth nearly what you think it's going to be. And therein, Corey, goes into that back to the why do we have exit regrets, right? Sometimes we just don't double down and reinvest. We're exiting in a negative tone and, we don't feel good about it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is such an important topic to me, as I said, because the exit isn't the ultimate goal. Like, what's the purpose of the exit, right? Like, why? Why stop working at your company? Why sell it? Why have all that money? Why whatever? And if you can't answer that question, there's nothing that, that tries, especially, and you alluded to it, even though you didn't say it, but you alluded to it, like, especially because part of the entrepreneurial journey for a lot of folks is that, and this is not necessarily great, but it's just what happens for a lot of folks is that they so identify with their businesses in terms of their own identity and their own worth and their own, who they even just like, even, if you ask a business owner, who are you without your company and your title and what you, whatever, especially an entrepreneur, a lot of them are going to have trouble answering that question. I've thought about it. Some have other parts of their lives, but, especially this classic entrepreneurial hustle culture, all in, it often becomes an identity for people, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Maybe just give us, is there one more you want to highlight out of all the things in the book in terms of the pitfalls?
Yeah, and I think I'll share just kind of the overall framework so it makes sense in context. There's 3 aspects that I encourage people to be spending time and thinking about and aligning. Overall, creating a strategic transition plan. And to break it down into 3 core pillars, the first one is the one I mentioned, which is personal readiness. The second one is financial readiness. And the third is business readiness. And all 3 of those aspects for business owners need to be in alignment. And what I think is really cool, if people certainly want to dive in and learn more, I think it'll all start to make a lot of sense. When you do these exercises, I'm leading you down a path to explore all 3 of these through the book and, of course, through the masterclass. I've got all kinds of exercises, and it's almost like I'm leading you in a workshop, right, in these videos and everything. So it's very easy to consume and very doable to do these exercises. The key thing, Corey, is that people have to make the time for it. It's just like another part of being an entrepreneur and owner is making that time. So yeah, the framework overall is business, personal, financial. And how do we get things to align? And how do we give ourselves enough runway so that they can align? And when you have a business operational plan, I'll call that, is different than this plan is just for you. You might not want to have your team eyes on it. You're not ready for that. But you might want to share some of the things on the business strategy that they need to help you implement. And so that is a really key intersection point that I discuss is, you got to be looking at your business from the 40,000 foot down. And then you got to work with your team to help you execute kind of the bottom up plan. And this book's going to give you all kinds of ideas to identify what potential risks there are, whether it's on the personal side, but from the business side, the big categories of things to look at are the attractiveness of the business, the transferability of the business, and the inherent risk factors in the business. And if those risk factors can be mitigated or any of those other aspects can be built up or not. And the answer sometimes is no, they can. And it is what it is. And sometimes it is, yeah, absolutely, we can. We just need to invest in it. And that's the alignment piece.
So, that leads me to what I admit is a bit of a softball question here, because I know that, but I do want to discuss to make a point. So, in light of the fact that there are these aspects of your book that say, okay, hey, listen, these are the things you can do and need to do to, help prepare your business sale, help, maximize enterprise value, all that kind of stuff. When should people go into your book or your course? Because a lot of folks, like the default people that don't know better, would say, oh, business transition handbook. I'll read that when I'm ready to do a business transition, right? So I admit it's a softball question, but please.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the fallacy, right? You can't do exit planning when you're exiting. It's just too late. And I think the most common answer, and the answer that I would probably emphasize, is 5 to 7 years. Yeah. And people who say to me, oh, I'm 1 to 3 away. Well, here's the translation. You actually need to start right now. Yeah. You're already late. And the people that say 10 years, that's awesome. Great. Love it. Fantastic. And any longer than that, absolutely on board with it. So I think 5 to 7 is kind of the sweet spot. There's a growing percentage, Corey, of entrepreneurs who are saying that they intend to exit their company within the next 5 years. Some of that is baby boomer age related. Some of it is life stage and kind of getting burned out related, right? They've survived a number of these entrepreneurs that have been through a number of economic crises, COVID. I mean, they're just worn out. So there's some of those things too that are influencing that number. Those people probably need to get started right now. Yeah. So with the course, what I'm trying to do is reach entrepreneurs earlier in their journey. And what I'm saying with Endgame Entrepreneurship is building with the exit in mind. And so these are for companies that aren't necessarily day one startups, but I'd love for the day 2 or week 1. And I'm being facetious, but when the time is right, I don't think a company that's under 3 years, I would say, no, don't read my book. I mean, it's all goodness, right? If you want to build value in your business and you're building with an exit in mind, the book, the course is all goodness for you. Yeah. And, why is it that venture-backed startups, when they're going through a pitch deck process, know inherently that the venture capitalists are going to ask them about their exit plan. Why is it that no other entrepreneur takes that to heart as part of what they should be considering and doing? And so that's another big aspect of the book is reverse engineering your exit, building with the exit in mind so that we have an understanding of who might be the best fit buyer for us one day and reverse engineer. And when time is on your side, you can create more options and you can create more pathways. And so that's the other big why.
I love it. So before I shift gears, I want to talk a little bit broad on what's going on in the M&A market. Maybe, what's changed in the 4 years almost that we haven't talked. Talk to me a little bit more about the book and the course. Like, I think people have a general idea, but who's the ideal target? Is there anything industry specific? Is it geographic specific? I'm assuming not. It sounds like this could be for any business that's looking to grow and exit, right? But is there, and you mentioned a little bit that, especially this idea of building the exit, early on, but is there anything more specific on like who this is already really targeted to?
I think it's the 2 to 20 million lower middle market, a company that's been around a couple of years, at least a couple of years, that's found its way towards product market fit. If they don't have product market or product service fit, they probably will feel distracted. I know entrepreneurs enough to know that's probably the case. And that's okay, right? At some point, and I don't know what that is, if it's 5 years out, if it's 10 years out, and they're on a runway, at some point on that runway, they're going to start to think about their exit. And it's not always age, right? It's not always age, it's life stage. And it's kind of where you are. So my book's trying to meet you where you are. And the course is really meant for meeting people where they are. Because the nice thing about an asynchronous course and self-paced, people can pick up and come back to these videos. These are short videos. Right. There's over 70 of them, right? And the order follows the book chapters. And so it just flows nicely if they're following the book or they don't have to read the book, but it's kind of a nice accompaniment. And with all the exercises, they might find themselves jumping around, which is totally fine. But at least knowing what that content is. Corey, it's the masterclass. I chose that word because I was pretty thoughtful about it. I said, you know what? You could go get an MBA or you could take this. And this is not an MBA, right? This is a recognition that you're busy. You're an entrepreneur who's going to kind of consume it on your own time. But the level of information is kind of MBA worthy. Okay. And then the other part of it is there's a practical case study kind of, tangible understanding. This isn't just some esoteric math. This is like real math and real numbers and why they're important to you. And then all these marketing concepts and sales concepts, all this stuff kind of blended into one. And it's, I think, a great investment. People who have $1 million revenue business, if they invest 1%, that's $10,000. I'd be hard pressed if someone says, I won't get an ROI from that. I will challenge them and say, yes, you will. You just got to put the money or not the money, but you got to put the time in for the ideas. So it's kind of like this exponential ROI when you work on the enterprise value of your business. And that is like the best kept secret, right? If we are truly investing in the enterprise value, what's $10,000? You know what I mean? So, and the other thing, in addition to the learning side, is support. I call myself the business transition Sherpa for a reason. It's support. It's being with you on your journey. And when I created the masterclass, I thought, oh my God, I'm with them, but I'm not. And I know they're going to have questions. People are going to have questions. And I don't want to just leave them. So I wrapped a couple of things with it that I think are really important and make it unique. One is a community. In and of itself, it's not unique. However, the way we're doing it, I think, is unique because we are tacking on a 1-year complimentary. It's included with the price is group advisory. So you'll get access to business transition experts and ask questions and go through chapters and hopefully, connect with other entrepreneurs from a peer-to-peer perspective, but we'll be facilitating those ask anything sessions and so on. And so that's my chance to sort of say to the community is, look, we're here to support you. This is content that you can consume on your own, but I know that left to entrepreneurs' own devices, they're going to get really into it for 5 minutes and then walk away. So this is a way to hold everybody accountable to it. And you mentioned EO and, there's Vistage and groups. This is a perfect way that EO forums, if everybody in the forum gets access to the course, they can hold each other accountable. And I've been talking to some EO groups about that. And so that's the other thing that makes me excited is, so who is this best for? I think it's great for companies that aren't day one, but are at least 3 years old. They're between 2 to 20 million revenue. It's a US focused approach. However, if your company is in Canada or if you're in another country, I guarantee you'll get value from it. But it is definitely a kind of a US focused, some specifics on tax and stuff like that.
Right. Right. All right. So let's jump out. So, when we spoke last, at least on air, it was November of 2020, right? So I guess that means we're in the pandemic. Okay. As I think about the timing on that, we're recording this in July of 2024. It'll probably air in August or September, right? So it'll be almost 4 years. It's 3.5 plus 3 whatever years now, or 3 3/4. Let's talk a little bit about, a lot has happened in that time, right? Generally in the world, a lot has happened in the deal market. Let's talk a little bit about what are some of the differences? What are the trends? What have you been seeing compared to the last time you and I were together?
Yeah, I think, there was still a lot of deal activity happening. It hadn't totally closed off in the pandemic. So I think when you and I met, there was still a fair amount going on, but there was a lot of uncertainty building. And so you had this combination of private equity groups with dry powder to continue to invest. Yes. And everybody's looking for, quote unquote, the right deals. Strategics were focused on supply chain issues and trying to keep the lights on. Yes. So I think on the strategic side, it was pretty challenging, and I think it remained challenging for a while. More recently with the rising interest rates, it's put some pressure on prices and transaction value. So some would say that makes it a buyer's market. But I think for the buyers, the lending markets are tricky and they really have to be able to service the debt. So yes, that could put some pressure on the price paid for these businesses. The other thing that I'm seeing is that the private equity firms who are looking for deals are moving down into the down market, into the lower middle market, which I'll describe as under 50 million. There's different definitions of that. But the way I kind of look at the lower middle market is if a investment bank says the company's too small or the deal is too small, that's lower middle market. So it could be 75 million in revenue or what have you. But so I think that's also a trend. I see a lot of private equity firms have two investment theses. One is focused on the platform. And, of course, that's going to be a larger investment. And the other is, more of that tuck-in and add-on. And so where I focus is in that lower middle market. So I've had, more conversations with PEs who are interested in those add-on areas. I think the roll-up trend is still continuing, and it will. The pockets of where people have interest is developing and will continue to develop for strategic advantage. And then the other type of financial buyer that we really don't see a lot in the news, it's not the sexy PE. Everybody knows the PE group kind of moniker, but these groups are also financial buyers, and they are in it for a longer term than comparatively, they are family offices. Yeah. Now, not all family offices do investing and have a buy and hold strategy. But if a family office is doing investing, most likely they will have a buy and hold strategy. And comparing it to a private equity firm who has more like a 5 to 7 year kind of hold and sell time horizon. And so if you're looking to sell your business and you're looking for fit, one of the things I talk about in the book is who should own your business after you. And I go through the different types of buyers, right? Strategic, financial, and related. And so when it comes to this segment, which we're focused on here, which is financial buyers, there are more financial buyers than you might be aware of, right? So the first, of course, is the PE. Second that I've mentioned, here's the family office. And the other one that I think has developed quite a bit over the last 5 years are the acquisition entrepreneurs. And these might be small search funds, people who are being compensated by potential investors to go find a business. They're typically approaching baby boomers who do not have a succession plan. And they're all over the country. They're all over the country saying, hey, I want to buy your business. So it's been really, really interesting as an M&A advisor talking to potential sellers. And I say to them, hey, have you been approached? And they're like, yeah, I circular file those, or yeah, I don't know what to do with them. And that's where I can be helpful. And also, in representing on buy side or sell side, representing an intermediary role to say, look, a lot of times the sellers aren't ready. And the other realization for both the book and the course, the big takeaway is that buyers buy on their time, not yours. And so when it comes to the market trends, I think that will still always, now and forever, be a truism. Buyers buy on their time, not yours. And it creates that imperative that we need to be thinking about who's the best fit buyer, what motivations do they have, what problems does our business solve for them, and getting our business ready so that it can be sold at any time, so that if you're approached by any of these, strategics or financial buyers, that you are ready to have a conversation, you're ready to engage. And so, Corey, in a nutshell, those are some of the things I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And definitely we're seeing a lot of the same trends. I mean, one of the things you mentioned, family offices. And I think, there's definitely been a trend we've seen where more of them are getting into having outside investment arms that are focused on long, and again, more, not always, but more often than long-term holds. And, it's a very different kind of capital. In fact, I won't say even the industry, whatever, because it's in the press, now, like we have a new client who in his prior business had PE-backed money, and let's just say he's no longer at that firm. And this time around in his new venture, he's got family office money very intentionally because of the difference, because of his experience and the difference in terms of the, what he wants. So we're definitely seeing that. And then, it's interesting. So the ability to understand, I mean, even like start with the difference between a financial buyer and a strategic buyer. And then even within, I love the fact that within financial buyers, you broke it down into 3 segments. And obviously it's even more nuanced than that, right? In terms of,
right. I put ESOP under financial buyers too.
Yeah.
But of course that can spill over into the related category depending on how you view it. But it's a bank transaction most often.
Right. So we're definitely seeing those trends. And then, certainly in, for example, financial services, and, we do a lot of wealth management, and the PE in the last 5 years, is certainly like in the time period that we're talking about, last 4 years, let's call it. There's been a huge shift in PE money coming into that space and doing exactly what you're talking about, right? Finding a anchor investment and then, funding all the tuck-ins and the expansion. And there are firms in that industry that are doing 20 tuck-in deals a year,
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And in an industry where you didn't even have PE money to speak up more than 5 or 7 years ago at all, right? And now it's all over the place, and the rate of acquisition has gone up significantly. And and it's one of those industries that didn't, except for 1 month when the stock market dropped during COVID, but then it came back up. Like it pretty much did not, like no deal got killed even that time. It just delayed for like 30 or 45 days and then kicked up again. So this is an industry that largely didn't miss a beat, kept growing through COVID and has kept coming. Yeah, so it's really interesting in that way. So listen, there are so many factors here, and it's impossible to have a crystal ball. So I'm not asking you to guarantee anything, whatever. But, obviously one of the things we all do as advisors is to try to guide people, right? We're planning in the future. And one of the things one of the things I love that you said is sort of being ready to sell, right? Because you don't want when the buyer is ready. And I've definitely, for example, in the wealth management space, had a lot of clients that were not looking to sell, but because the multiples have gone crazy comparatively because the PE money's come in. And I remember I had one guy who was, I spoke to him a year before, and he said, yeah, 5 to 7, I got a 5 to 7 year runway. I got to continue to build this thing, and then we'll look at exit. And a year later, he called me up and said, okay, which banker should I use to? I'm like, I thought you were, he said, Corey, I'm seeing these multiples that they're almost triple what they used to be. Like, I don't know how I don't know how long this is going to last. And I don't know how I can pass up, this kind of money. So what do we got interest rate factors, which, starting out, we got inflation that's coming down. There's politics. There's so many things, so many factors that could change things, tax policy, you name it. Other than just generally saying, be prepared, right, to sell. I'm sure you get these questions, right? As somebody who is, putting out content, well, sort of, and then in your direct consulting practice, like, how do you address people's question? I guess the big bug would be like, how do I plan with all these, factors that create uncertainty, and also that, unlike what, some of the talking heads say, like I always joke about, I love when they say, oh, the stock market went down today because of XYZ. You have no idea. The stock market is so complex to predict it on what actually caused something on a day-to-day basis. Like you're making that up. You're just attributing it to some factor. Any case, how do you address people when there's so many complex factors and when you don't have a crystal ball for the future to help sort of plan in the best way they can?
Well, as you mentioned, I do work with clients one-on-one in an advisory capacity. And if it's in a pre-M&A capacity and they've got a bit of time for preparation, that's ideal, right? So how much time do we need? It depends, but let's say 1 to 2 years. at a minimum. And one of the very first things we're going to do, Corey, is we're going to do a number of different assessments to baseline where we are. And a big one is a business estimate of value. It's going to put us in a way that we can have conversations about, well, why might the multiple go up or why might the multiple go down? Because doing valuations is an art and a science. And I have access to databases and we can look at things and we can have conversation about risk factors. We can have conversations about value drivers and make comparison on benchmarks in your industry. And that's a great place to start because in doing that, obviously we collectively are learning, but also we are determining where priorities should be. Yeah. And so that focus, if we like to think in 90-day chunks, in EOS, we're using rocks, big rocks. What are the big rocks? And where should we be focusing? And so that is the approach that I use with clients in an advisory capacity on an ongoing basis. The other way I work with clients and use that approach to baseline is not only the business, but it's the personal readiness. I have a personal readiness assessment. There's a financial diagnostic where we can talk with them about, well, what's the magic number? Why do we think that is? What do you need to be reaching? And do we have a gap? And I have some excellent calculator sheets that we use to say, okay, well, let's work backwards. And what growth rate do we need to be hitting or how much time do we have? And we can do some math on that. And that data is really, really interesting because then we're not guessing anymore, right? Yeah. We can kind of lock in. Now we can always change and modify. Those numbers are written in pencil, so to speak, but it gives us a starting point. Because if there's a value gap, you have to understand whether or not you can close that gap. For some companies, they say, well, I'm going to acquire businesses. I've done what I can through organic growth. It's time for acquisitive growth. And because I'm an M&A advisor, I can support them on the buy side. I had one client just had a closing yesterday, which was really exciting. And I had worked with him and his wife for 9 months to develop their strategic transition plan. And what was pretty cool about it is that the husband-wife team didn't know that they were going to sell to a third party. They wanted to explore other options. And so that's how we approached it. And their strategic plan kind of laid out, those options. Now that they've sold the business, I do want to kind of go back to them and say, look, there's some personal readiness and transition things that I still want you to be mindful and thinking about, even now that the business is sold. And so I think that's the power of the process is if we can work together proactively for, again, a year or longer, to help you get ready, to help your business get ready. And then when that little bluebird comes a-calling, which it did for them, they were ready, and they were mentally kind of ready in that place and felt like, yes, now it's time. We weren't ready 3-4 years ago. We're ready now.
Yeah, and I love that little point you made about how, you can actually use deals. I mean, so I mentioned this once or twice where I did a talk. I was in Singapore for the Global Leadership Conference for Entrepreneurs Organization. I did actually that we did 3 workshops. And the theme of it was there's a deal for that, meaning that any business frustration, challenge, or opportunity you're looking to take care of, like you can do it through a deal, whether it's an acquisition, joint venture, strategic alliance, whatever. Not that you should, it just should be a tool in your toolbox. You're having trouble hiring people, you can recruit, you can get bonuses, you can put lists on sites, you can hire recruiters, but you can also do an acquire, right? Okay. So in this case as well, if talking about the gaps that you were talking about, hey, you're thinking about exiting, especially if you are that 5 or 7 or 10 years out. Okay, well, if we want to fill that gap, we can fill it organically. We can build that capacity organically in-house. We can hire people. We can build that process or system or try to expand the product line into a new market or whatever it is. But we could also potentially do a deal to get there. And, it's interesting because the roll-ups understand the conversation of multiple arbitrage, right? And it gets, at an extreme, it gets a bad name, and it should. Like if the roll-ups who are not adding any other value and are just, lining the stuff up just to get a multiple arbitrage, the market goes bad, whatever, and they're overpaying, because if someone else would pay, a 5x EBITDA or whatever it is on, for the company, and they're going to pay an 8 because they're going to get a 12 or a 15. And then the market changes, or that doesn't work, and they haven't added any value, they've overpaid, right? So there's a problem with that. But there's also a real add value multiple arbitrage where companies get, not only do you get a multiple on a higher base, but you get a higher multiple because you're bigger, right? And there's a legitimate way to do that. So I love this idea that you pointed out about, potentially doing deals, whether it's acquisitions or others, to fill the gaps. I want to highlight that so that you can then be more valuable to someone else, and you don't have to be a roll up to do that, 1 or 2 of those deals that can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a potential client of mine. We're in conversations about a buy side, and he's in the transportation industry. I had met him. I did a workshop, Vistage workshop, I guess, well more than a year ago. And lo and behold, he reached out and he said, yeah, we're considering acquiring, kind of the baby boomer strategy, right? They don't have successors. We want to start to roll up a few things in our geography. Can you help us with that? And so in that way, I'm kind of like their outsourced corp dev department. And, they've never done this before. And so there's that side of it. So I'm pretty excited about that opportunity. I do more sell side than buy side, but I think strategically buy side is pretty fun.
Yeah. Yeah. We're the same. We're doing a lot more and more, like we've traditionally done more sell side as well, but we're doing more and more buy side these. And we've always done some buy side, but we did, like, the ratio is going up on the buy side, and it's fun. All right, well, listen, we could talk for another hour, but we're running out of time here. So let's go to the final two questions. One is just, where can people find out more about all the things you have going on? You, direct service, the book, the course, the whatever. I assume there's a hub place they can go for all of this, right?
Yeah, Corey, the best place is the businesstransitionsherpa.com. It's got my book, my course, the podcast, my advisory services. And absolutely, if people want to get in touch with me, please do connect. And then there's even some free resources, some business transition resources that are available to you. If you're interested to take some of those assessments that I've mentioned, they're available on the site too.
Love it. All right. And listen, my final question is usually about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And I ask people, what does freedom mean to them? But you covered that on the last episode. So I'm gonna make it a little more specific here. And I'll show my bias, because obviously freedom is a big value of mine. How important is, like, the conversation of freedom when people are looking to exit? Does that come up for them? Like, where is that in the conversation of what you do for entrepreneurs and business owners who are thinking about exit?
Yeah, so important, because people do see their role in their life in a different way. When you start to talk about a pretty big change or pretty big transition. And, for some people, they are seeking a little more freedom. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? And so you're always going to bed every night worrying about payroll, or you're worrying about this client, or you're worrying about something. And I think some people, more than that, freedom ties in with it. Freedom is a desire to choose how and who and where you work and things like that, and how much you work. So I do feel like freedom, kind of fits into things. But I think for just that weight lifting, off your shoulders, I don't know what the one word would be, but I do think that feeling of freedom is first when you feel free of those encumberments. And it was funny, I can't remember who I was talking to. Oh, it was one gentleman who came on my show, and he had sold his business, and it got to about 150 million in revenue. It was a pretty big company. And he talked about that feeling that being an entrepreneur is like being in prison. I was like, oh my God, like that just sounds horrible, right? Where you're just so tethered. And I think that freedom comes when you feel untethered and you can make choices. And for him, he wanted to, travel. He wanted to spend more time with his family. He's created another business, but it's more mission oriented, like how to help other entrepreneurs. I see that a lot from successful entrepreneurs kind of doing their next thing. They don't want to just put their feet up on the desk or go to the beach. They get bored after a day. And so it's something that is freeing in that, you've got food on the table. You can turn the lights on. You don't have to have, a 6-figure, 7-figure income, whatever it is. You can be happy with whatever it is and feel fulfilled in a different way because you're unencumbered from the financial dollar.
Love it. Laurie Barkman, thanks for being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Oh, Corey, thanks again for having me on again 2 times. I'm so honored.
2 times. All right, folks.